Welcome to this share research webinar in the series Common Misconceptions about Share Research. We've done a couple already and we're going to do a few more highlighting specific misconceptions. And today we're going to talk about how you can use share research to show correlation with brand growth and business success. At the end of the day, that's what we all ultimately are working for, to make our companies or the brands we're working for succeed even better. Who are we here today? Happy to have Fredrik Piran here. Hi, Fred.
Hi. Hi, Hans. Right, I'll quickly introduce myself. I am Fredrik Piran, commonly known as Fred. I am the co-founder of a company called My Telescope. We are a marketing intelligence and search tool, basically, that's developed and specialize also in share of search. We're the only ones currently who do share of search in combination with some other things. And we've been researching and doing things with share of search for the last 5 years, also together with Les and James Hankins, which most people have heard of in relation to share of search as such.
Right. Thank you, Fred. And I'm Hans. I'm a practitioner. That means I worked with advertising for 40 plus years. I've run agencies in Sweden and in New York. Always looking for ways to prove to my clients that what we do at the agency actually works and delivers results. And that has been a challenge over the years using the traditional methods. Traditional methods are sometimes a bit slower than today's pace in the market is. They're often more expensive than your budgets can afford. And they are not necessarily accurate because, again, they reflect what people say, not what they necessarily do. So I'm very happy to be here to talk about share research. Before we dive into the misconception of today, Fredrik, can you just give us 60 seconds on what share research really is?
Absolutely. I'll try to do the 60 seconds. Share research is basically very, very simple. What we all want to do as marketeers is that we want to create interest. We want to create intent. We want to make sure that people think about us moving forward. And there is commonly no better way to look at whether people think of you or not by checking what it is they fill out in a search field, either Google or somewhere else. Because that's how human nature has become. We think about something, we are interested. The first thing we do is we search for it, mainly online. 81% of people actually do that immediately online. The question then, of course, is that you get some sort of volume, you get some sort of intent of how many people are out there. And the question is that good or is that bad? Well, in order to do that, we need to compare it to something else, either other competitors or other topics that we're thinking of or other parts of a category. For example, if you do electric bikes, you could do electric scooters because those are possibilities that people have. And then we put that on a scale of 100 and then you get your share of search, basically showing which way people lean, either for a brand or a product or just as a market trend.
All right. Thanks, Fred. So on to today's topic about correlation. Is that something that people use in the right way, that concept, or what can you say about correlation, Fred?
Yeah, correlation is, with the data world becoming more and more, data everywhere, it's always about correlations, but there is already a common misconception there between correlation and causation. And this might become a little bit technical, this entire presentation maybe. So if you have any questions, don't be afraid to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. And don't worry, if you're a seasoned data analyst, you'll be able to follow, but also if you don't know anything about data, you'll be able to follow. So correlation basically just means that there is a relationship or that there's a similarity between two sets of data. but it doesn't obviously mean that there is a causation, right? It doesn't mean that one set of data is in line or that they have something in common. The example here is very clear: is that you could think, or you could say, that there's more shark attacks because people buy more ice cream, which is obviously not true. The common denominator here is that summer, which is why it peaks, but it's just that a lot of people talk about correlation, but correlation doesn't necessarily mean the same as causation. And whenever we talk to new marketeers, or we talk to marketeers or marketeers to explain it, it's something that we continuously must remind people of, right? That there is a difference between the two. So also when we were doing research on share of search, there's many different ways of running correlations, but then you actually have to look at a way of correlating that can also explain this causation, right? And that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's good to keep in mind. Summer coming up.
Yes.
Don't eat ice cream.
Exactly. There might be more shark attacks.
With the tool you are working with and the company you have started, Fred, with My Telescope, how do you do share research differently?
Differently, I don't know, but what we normally do is what I would recommend people to do if you want to do it yourself is to use a Pearson correlation, right? Pearson correlation, and there's also a Spearman correlation, but a Pearson correlation has a correlation that actually has what we call an independent variable and a dependent variable. So it will actually look at the cause and effect of A to B. To give you a very clear example, we will measure how much it rains, and then we will see how much plants grow. In this case, we will see how much is there as a search, that's what we call the independent variable, and how much does that then run towards market share or sales from that perspective. And then you can get a value between +1 and -1, and +1 means that it's going in the same direction and then at the exact same speed as what the initial one does, right? So what we've been doing with all of our correlations is that we've been using this kind of Pearson correlation, using specifically that, and then looking at every correlation that was higher than 0.7. That means that you have a very strong correlation. If the p-value is smaller than 5%, and the p-value is basically your margin of error, right? Now, this does look complicated, and the formula is right there, but you actually have it in a function in Excel. So if you're not a seasoned data analyst, you can do this in Excel. You just need to put the two, numbers, data series that you want to have. And then there's a function, a Pearson correlation function that you can run in Excel. And you will get the coefficient and you will get the p-value. So something relatively simple that you can do yourself if you want to try also to investigate your correlation between share of search and your market share.
Okay. If it's this simple, can you then just use Google Trends to validate share of search?
In principle, yes. And I think that's what a lot of people have started with. And we started with the same. We started looking at Google Trends and check whether we could do the same. But there are some challenges when you specifically think about Google Trends, right? And that is that Google Trends is indexed, right? And what we mean with indexed is Google Trends has a maximum value of 100, right? So if, for example, over the last months, you've always had, let's say, 20,000 searches per month, then that 20,000 kind of becomes your index 100. Now, if next month something happens and you get 100,000 searches, then that suddenly becomes the index 100 and everything else falls back. So all your historic numbers basically change, right? There's one challenge. The second challenge is also that it's randomized, which means that it takes samples. And if you use Google Trends with the exact same keywords now and 10 minutes from now, you could actually get different historic values for the keywords that you've used. And that makes it a little bit hard when you want to create the right data sets for doing this. The third thing then, I guess, is that you have to use the right keywords. Because what we've seen from our own experience is that some keywords give you a very good correlation. So if you want to use search data to look specifically at the correlation towards your sales data or your share of search or your share of market, and you want to use that for predictions, you have to make sure that you use the right keywords, right? And that's a little bit of trial and error, especially in Google. You'll have to work your way forward, look at different things, run a lot of correlations, right? And what you need to do is you need to use long time series in Google Trends to make sure that you have most fluctuations taken out of it and that you have a reliable set of data, right? Now I know that Les, when he first did his share of search, he was very much using Google data, and James, and this example as well, they've been using Google Trends data, but there they took very long time series. When Les did his first share of search on the automobile industry, that was 13 years of data. It's very long. In this case, where we looked at the market share for LG, specifically within this category, that was also 11 years of data from 2004 to 2013. That's also quite a long set of data, for which you then also need to get the right market share, volumes, or sales numbers, right? And getting it for 13 years, that's sometimes a challenge as such. But you can definitely use Google Trends. Our experience is that you have to, as I said, try multiple keywords. Also, take series that are longer than 7 years. So you also have to then think that you need to get that sales data for more than 12 years or 7 years, and you need to get that consistently. But also that you have to think of using what we call a 12-month rolling average. And so the 12-month rolling average means that you're basically going to lose 1 year on that year because you're going to average everything out on that 1 year to take the spikes up and down away as much as you can. And once you've done all that, and also rolling average, if you're not a data analyst, there is a function in Excel with which you can do it. You just have to select it and click rolling average, and it will create that new timeline for you. Once you've done that, you can basically build visualizations and trend lines, and then you will see that those trend lines will parallel out. That's what we see in most industries that we've had so far.
So there are some real challenges using Google Trends to see how it works with your brand. I think my experience is that the biggest challenge is the long time series. Very few companies have the data available.
True. I mean, it needs to be consistent. It needs to be measured in a consistent way, right? Already, quite some companies sometimes have trouble getting market share. FMCG companies were the ones that have been able to provide us the easiest with that data, because quite a lot of them use data like Nielsen data, which is basically, the number of barcodes scanned, right? And that was quite useful to get that, and that's relatively stable for the last couple of years. Other sources, it's always a little bit more difficult on how exactly everything is calculated. And getting it internally is sometimes a big challenge in itself, getting that consistent sales data. Okay.
So what do you suggest instead? What's your alternative solution, Fred?
If you can, what we've seen is that when we do what we've seen in order to improve share of search correlations and make it easier is when you can work on search volumes for different keywords. If you can get search volumes for different keywords, then that makes it a lot simpler, and you need less years or longer time, shorter time series in order to get a good result, right? Because it's not the trends part. So it's less, it could be less volatile, but it's also much more accurate than what you have done, right? Run it against all keywords that you can possibly find, and also look at different time lags, right? because the time lags are quite different as well. What we've seen in the past is that people then use Google Trends, and then first of all they say, "Oh, but we've tried Google Trends and it doesn't work." There was a research agency that contacted us recently and said, "Oh, we haven't really seen much," and then we helped them, working on all these things, and we're still doing a project with them. But also time lags are quite important, and that's actually why I would think one of the most important things also to create predictability. As little as last week, we've done a correlation project with one of our partner agencies for one of their clients, where we looked at, they have an application. So we looked at the download of the application towards different keywords that they have. And when they looked at the brand name, just the brand name on the search, you could see that there was a 2-month lag between people searching for the brand name and actually downloading it. Whereas when people would put the brand name with the word app combined with it, there was almost an immediate correlation from a time perspective, which makes sense, right? Because first you want to find out more about this particular brand, and you kind of go with it. And then when you're ready to download the app, you kind of say, okay, I need the app for this. And then you combine them and you download it. But what's very interesting there for that brand in particular is that you kind of get an idea that the mental journey that people make for mental availability to actually going to download is about 2 months. And if you don't want to make campaigns, or if you want to then work on your branding and so forth, you can actually go to a CFO or to your management and say, we know we're going to invest this now. If we make this move, we know it will take approximately 2 months before we see something happen. Because that's, of course, always the problem that marketeers have, is that the rest of management expect it to happen instantly, instantaneous. And that's not always the case, right? So how do you get these kind of things? Well, or the volumes and so forth. And you can actually get it using our tool. That's one of the possibilities that you can get it. If we look, for example, in one of the parts that we have, now there's a lot of different parts here. Here, if we look at the different ad agencies that are available in the world, for example, right, this is in one particular market. Then we can start to see what all the different keywords are that they have, and what the average search volumes are that you have there. This would then be the average. No, this would be the search volume for last month, the exact search volume for last month. But within our tool as well, when you go to one of our dashboards, you can easily download the time series for at least a year, and then depending on how long you're tracking, actually longer. So then you would have all of those time series and all of those volumes with which you can work to start with. Secondly, you will also be able to get all of the keywords, right, that you're working with here, and then also see which keywords you can get, and you can build those time series yourselves. For agencies who work with us, we have a partner agency contract, so that agencies can actually just send us the sales data, and then we have a function that does this automatically. It will look at all the different keywords, look at different lags that we've identified, and then check correlations and come back with, as I said, the correlations and the margins of error, for which we then can immediately weed out, these are good, these are bad. And that's quite interesting work, because, well, we can get it in a couple of minutes, so that's easy. And that function will also be integrated into our tool by the end of this year. But it's very interesting because you immediately will see also some of the strategic decisions that you can take, right? And that's quite interesting.
Do you have, especially for the soda industry, you mentioned before that you had an example there, soft drinks.
Yes. I mean, we've run soft drinks in different markets. And for example, when we see in for all the soft drinks in the market, this was in the UK, we had an average of 74%. So that's, if I told you that the correlation needs to be 0.7, right? you'll get to 0.746 in this case, 74% of correlation between all of those share of searches and the actual sales of that. What we saw that the lag was approximately 1 week, and that's something that we've seen in general. So that the shorter the sales cycle, the faster people the faster that lag will be. If you're buying more expensive items or more life decision taking or more life influencing decisions, then you see a longer lag. For a specific case in Sweden, we've looked at the energy drinks business, so Red Bull, Monster, and so forth. What we've seen is that the combination of the brand name together with the words "flak," prijs, which basically means flat pack and price, that combination seemed to be the best correlation for all of the brands that were there, which immediately gave an insight to the person we were working with, saying that, or proving their suspicion that the market was to a large extent driven by pricing. The market was to a large extent driven by a smaller number of heavy users, but who didn't necessarily seem to be brand loyal. So if they could get their hands on Monster for 1 week, Red Bull another week, and so forth, they would actually mix between all of those.
Well, this was for the soft drinks, and you said there's a lag of a week or two. How many industries have you looked at, and how much does the time lag differ between a soft drink or an expensive item like a car, for example?
Yeah, we've done quite a lot of. We have done some research ourselves. Then we've also collaborated with the IPA, the International Practitioners of Advertising in London, where we have created a think tank of ourselves, some agencies, some brands, and some academics, with also Les Bennett and James Hankins. And we've looked through approximately 30 use cases across 12 industries, right? Then there's a couple of here now that we have tested in the meantime that weren't there. I mentioned them in our previous webinar. For example, the agriculture industry. There was one specific niche within dairy farming where there was a very good correlation between what they saw their market share and their share of search, right? So if they saw their share of search increase, their market share went up as well. And so that one we have to add. As I said, what we see is that the larger the investment is, the longer it takes. Investment funds, pension plans, right? They would take 7 to 8 months for people to decide which one they would invest in. Whereas supermarkets, it would be 2 weeks. FMCG would generally be 1 week. Automotive, that would also be a couple of months, basically. That's what we've seen so far.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So far, no questions from you attendees. Do you have anybody who wants to ask anything before we start to round this up a little bit, sum this up? No questions right now. Okay.
Well, that means that's either a very good or a very bad thing.
No, you've been crystal clear.
Okay. Yes.
Well, we can see how good this was, because again we have there comes a question, and then I'll come with the sum up. Travel and tourism, Fred, is that a category you've been working with?
Yes, they went into the hospitality sector, right? So yes, we have been looking at that. There is a correlation, and I think that's going to be more important for the travel industry as well, because I mean the travel industry, people in general, when they want to travel somewhere, they don't necessarily they just type in holiday in France, right? And then whichever country you're in, a lot of different tour providers, for example, will work with AdWords, which means that they will just continue to drive up the prices. And what happens in the end is that the person with the deepest pocket wins. What we've seen specifically in the hospitality industry is that with hotels.com and so forth, it starts increasingly more, becoming increasingly more important to have branded searches. Between branded searches and the market share, that's where we start seeing the correlations. So if you want to be in the travel industry, you need to increase your branded searches. And that's going to be only possible if you invest in your branding. I can't remember by heart what the lag is between those. I need to look it up from the kind of database that we've created. But I need to double check that and get back to Ben if that's okay.
Great. Thanks. Any other questions? Well, you promised to end this, Fred, in two ways. First, to sum up the most important key factors, and then to come with an irresistible offer.
Yes. It's going to be very simple. So if you want to do this yourself, and you can very much start looking at share of search using Google Trends, use the Pearson correlation that you have in your Excel. Make sure to use the function of the rolling averages. Check out different keywords and think about a time lag. So think that there might be some lag in between the different parts. So it would be good to investigate as well, looking at different resources like that. Alternatively, you can of course use My Telescope, for which you can now easily sign up and make your and start your 1 month free trial. If you already use your 1 month free trial but you want to extend it, reach out to me. It's just Frederic. You'll see it, my first name at mytelescope.io, and we'll make sure we'll extend it a little bit longer. And for all of the partner agencies that we have and the clients that we have, we can run these correlations in a very swift way for you and help you out on that one. So that's our pleasure.
Well, great. If we don't have any other questions, let's just advertise to future webinars. What do we have coming up, Frederic?
We have in this series on misconceptions, we have 2 more left. One is share of search for my industry. Does it work for different industries? And then how do we start implementing share of search? That's another one that we have. Okay. Oh, there's one more question coming from Ben. Very interesting and insightful session. Obtaining and calculating accurate rolling average market share is certainly a challenge for marketeers. Yes, that's also even the challenge that we have. What we've seen as well, Ben, is that of course, if you can't always get just straight market share, we've also been looking at making correlations between your share of search and your actual sales numbers as such. If we would then extrapolate and assume that if that works for your particular industry, it would work for others as well, then there's at least giving you some idea on what it could be. And that's kind of a little bit of a workaround. I hope that will help you as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Fred, and thank you all for attending. Everything we do is recorded and will be put on our YouTube channel, but we hope to see you in a couple of weeks again. Thanks.
Yes. Bye.
Bye now.